Hey everybody, welcome back to Vegas Weekly for Saturday, February the 5th, 2022. It's part 3 of our 6-part Vegas 101 series. And this week we're focused in on the part of Las Vegas most tourists will visit and where you'll probably spend most of your time. Stay tuned for Stripped. Okay, so this is a really easy lesson for me to teach. Basically, I'm just going to break the Strip down into a number of little regions. And we're going to talk about each one of those regions very briefly. Some things you might want to see there, the hotels and other attractions in that area, why you might want to stay in that area, why maybe you wouldn't want to stay in that area. Normally you hear people talk about the Strip in terms of the North Strip or the Center Strip or the South Strip, but I think that's way too generalized at this point. It just doesn't really give you a feel for different areas and what they're like. So I broke it down into 7 distinct regions, which I'll, again, talk about very briefly today. The first is what I call the Old North, followed by the New North, the Caesars Strip, the Land of the Giants, which I stole from a book somewhere. It's probably in the bookcase behind me, but I used it a little differently here. The City Center area, the Park District, and what I'll call the Far South. Okay, so let's start with the Old North. I call it the Old North because at one time there were a lot of hotels in this particular part of the Strip. And now there really isn't much. There are 5 properties that I'm going to highlight very briefly. There's the Strat, notable for the observation tower, which they call the Sky Pod now. There's a number of cool rides there. It has, kind of a nice position if you want to be equidistant between the Strip area and the downtown area, but it's in kind of a rough neighborhood. There's the Sahara, about half a mile down the Strip, which for a time was SLS, but before that it was Sahara. It goes way back to the 1950s. They've struggled there, but it's a nice property, and they're doing a lot of remodeling there, so definitely maybe a place to take a look at. Off to the east, away from the main Strip area, is the Westgate Hotel, which at one time was the Las Vegas Hilton. Before that, it was the International. Elvis performed here. There's even a statue, but I probably wouldn't go over there just for that reason. And then you've got Circus Circus. It's a clown. The kids like it. There's a free circus show. We're into that kind of thing. It's a little rundown, but it's there, and it tends to be pretty cheap. And then right next door is the new Resorts World complex, which is where the old Stardust was located. One of the newest, obviously, shiniest, biggest properties in Las Vegas. So definitely the sort of jewel of the Old North region. Why would you want to stay here? Probably the biggest reason you'd want to stay here, I guess, if you had the kids and they wanted to do the circus thing, maybe. But the other really good reason to stay here is because of the location of the Las Vegas Convention Center, which is right in the center of this area. If you've got a convention, or if you really want to see the newest hotel, then maybe this is the area to stay in. Otherwise, it's kind of a sketchy area. It's not very walkable. There's not a lot to see outside of the hotels themselves, so keep that in mind. Okay, so the next section of the Strip I just call the North Strip. It consists of the Wynn and Encore, which is a massive complex of 2 hotels, casinos, and just everything you could ever want in a hotel complex. And then right across the street, you have the Venetian and the Palazzo, which, like the Wynn and Encore, is kind of a city unto itself. These are both luxury properties, sort of top-of-the-line places to stay in Las Vegas. No question about it. Also in this area, you have the massive Fashion Show Mall. If you want to go shopping in Las Vegas and you don't have a ton of money and you're on the Strip, this is probably the place to go. There's a lot of malls, but a lot of them are really pricey. And then also I include the Treasure Island Hotel because it's right there on the same corner. Not quite as big a property, and it's one that's kind of faded over the years. People may have told you about a pirate battle there. It's not there anymore. But this is not a bad area to stay in. As I say, you've got two hotel complexes that just have about anything you could possibly want. I'd say particularly Venetian Palazzo. So if you can afford it, those are two really good spots to stay. You are kind of on the north end of the Strip, and it's not as accessible to a lot of the hotels further to the south. You're going to have to hike a little bit. But the properties themselves are so nice that you may not feel the need to leave too much. And again, you've got pretty good access to some of the properties we just talked about, including the new Resorts World. So this may be a good choice for some of you. The next section of the Strip is what I decided to call the Caesars Strip. And this is probably the most walkable area of the entire Las Vegas Strip. And this is where you'll tend to see the biggest crowds of people, whether it be day or into the wee hours of the morning. And it actually starts at the little tiny hotel called Casino Royale. There is actually a motel there, it really should be called. And it stretches its way down past Harrah's, the Link Promenade, which is a pretty cool place to wander around, the Flamingo, the oldest hotel that's still on the Las Vegas Strip, the Cromwell, and then even as you go across the street to the south, you have Bally's and Paris and Planet Hollywood. And that whole area is just night and day is a cluster of people. It is a great area to stay in for a couple of reasons. One, the room rates tend to be pretty reasonable. These are, in most cases, older properties, not as fancy, certainly as some of the ones we just talked about, but decent places by and large to stay. Everything is close together, and again, you get that feel of people night and day. I mean, it's a very busy area, so if that's not something you're interested in, maybe avoid these hotels or that area of the Strip most of the time. But otherwise, it's practically ideal for a new traveler. You're still close enough to the north, and you're close enough to the south. As I say, the reason I call it the Caesars Strip is because almost all those properties along there are owned by Caesars Entertainment. Now, on the opposite side of the street, next to Treasure Island, there is a series of 3, you might even say 4 properties, which are much like Venetian or Wynn, kind of self-contained universes. And they all have names which you've heard of over time. On the far north, you have the Mirage, the hotel that kind of reignited activity on the Las Vegas Strip way back now over 30 years ago. It's recently been sold to the Hard Rock Company, so expect some major changes in that area in the years to come. But for now, you can still check out the Volcano. You can still wander through the same hotel where Clark Griswold lost all his money. And a lot of it still looks very similar. So it's definitely in need of a little refresh. Just to the south of that is the Caesars area, which consists, first of all, of the Caesars Forum Shops, which is another huge mall, a little more upscale, but there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of restaurants as well as shops, and definitely a good place to wander around and a good way to get from the Mirage ultimately inside Caesars Palace, which again is a city unto itself. Probably one of the easiest properties to get lost in, but it's a name practically anybody who's ever heard anything about Las Vegas knows, and certainly has its share of shows and some great rooms and some great restaurants. One of the top of the line properties anywhere in town. And then across the street, you have the Bellagio, which is very famous in the 21st century, certainly, for the Bellagio fountains out front. It's a beautiful property, a lot of fun things to see and do there. But each and every one of these properties is huge. Just making your way through them is a chore. So that's why I decided to call this area the Land of the Giants. Because, even though you may be staying right next door to another property, it's going to take you like 20 minutes to get there. So just keep that in mind. If you want a property that's going to have everything, that's going to feel very much like the Vegas you've seen on TV, then these are great places to stay. If, on the other hand, what you really want is being able to easily move from one property to another and everything being really walkable, this is kind of tough. I mean, just getting in and out of these properties is a lot of work. but it's still a great location. To the immediate south of the Bellagio is the city center area. Most of it's owned by the MGM company, and all of it will be soon once they absorb the Cosmopolitan. It consists of the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Casino, the Aria Hotel and Casino. There's a residential area there called the Beer Towers. There's a very upscale shopping center there called Crystals. And then there's a couple of standalone hotels without casinos, the Vdara and the Waldorf Astoria, both of which great places to stay. If you can afford it, Waldorf Astoria, I mean, you know the name. Vdara is terrific. The rooms are like little apartments with kitchen facilities, laundry facilities. Great if you're going to be in town for an extended period of time, maybe with family or on business, and usually a pretty good deal. But for the average tourist, you're probably going to choose between Aria and Cosmo, and you really can't go wrong either place. Cosmopolitan has a lot of rooms. In fact, I'd say probably 80-85% of the rooms have outdoor terraces, which is unique. Any place on the Las Vegas Strip, you get the right view at the right height, you can go set out on your terrace at night and watch the Bellagio fountains, or maybe watch the planes land down at Harry Reid International Airport. But just breathtaking views, literally. You walk out on that terrace and it's... The Aria is also a beautiful property. Some great rooms. I've stayed there a couple of times recently. Both of these properties, tremendous restaurant selection. And they're, the casino. They've got casinos, okay? Not that big a deal. The interesting thing about the Cosmopolitan Casino and Hotel is it's on like 3 levels. Pretty much all the casino is on the main level, but there are restaurants and shops and things on the other levels, which is a little unusual for Las Vegas. And definitely check out the Chandelier Bar there at Cosmo. They have some interesting craft cocktails. This is a great, like I say, these are great hotels to stay at. The Aria is a little bit set back from the Strip, so it's a little bit of a hike to and fro, but again, you can't go wrong here, particularly if you can afford it. Just to the south of City Center is the Park District, and 10 years ago you wouldn't have called this the Park District, but I'm calling it that now. It consists of the Park MGM Hotel, which you've been to Vegas in the last 15-20 years, you may remember as the Monte Carlo, but they've made a ton of changes there. They've added a really cool entry area called Eataly, which has a number of fun little places to eat and shop. But also you have the New York Hotel and Casino, and across the way the huge MGM Grand Complex. And the reason I call this the sort of Park District is because you have a area, not unlike the Lake Promenade, called the Park. And it has, of course, its share of bars, restaurants, shops, etc. Getting redundant, isn't it? But it also happens to have the Park Theater, one of the most prominent concert venues in Las Vegas, where Lady Gaga performs, for example. And just a little bit further down the park is the T-Mobile Arena, where the very successful Vegas Golden Knights NHL franchise plays. And of course, they have some major concert events and other things there as well. So if you're going to an event at one of those venues, this is a great area to stay. It also tends to be pretty reasonably priced compared to some of the other areas. And you do have pretty good access to everything on the south end of the Strip, obviously, but also to the city center area, and you're pretty close there to the Caesars Strip as well. So it's a decent location, good prices. There's a lot to do around here. New York, I think, is one of the most sort of budget-friendly places to stay, play, eat, anywhere. And of course, MGM has just about everything. But again, it's one of those places, don't get lost. Finally, we reach the far south end of the Strip, this area south of Tropicana Boulevard. Couple of properties we'll mention here really quickly. The Tropicana itself, which has been around since the 50s. It may be undergoing a name change sometime soon, so keep an eye out for that. There's a Bally's already, but it's changing its name to the Horseshoe. There's a decent chance that Tropicana will become Bally's. So keep that in mind. Do some Googling before you travel to Las Vegas, because some locations and names may have changed. As I said, the property's been there a long time, but there's not a lot to recommend it. I mean, it's a perfectly decent place to stay, perfectly decent place to gamble. Just doesn't have a lot of attractions. But if you want to see it as it is, you might want to check it out because there could be some major renovations going on there. If you don't mind wandering a little further off the strip, you get one of the sort of budget properties, if you want to call it that. It used to, for years, to be known as Hooters Hotel and Casino. There's still a Hooters there, but now it's called Oyo. Probably not the ideal place to stay. But definitely has some cheap gambling, some cheap food, definitely a little bit different crowd than you get at some of the properties we've been talking about recently. So might want to check it out. But the main part of the Far South is the hotel complex. It's really just one giant complex. The Excalibur, of course, which has the castle. The Luxor, which has the pyramid. And then, of course, the Mandalay Bay complex, a beautiful property with one of the nicest pools anywhere in Las Vegas. We'll talk about that in weeks to come. But all of those properties are kind of indoor properties. There's a walkway between Luxor and Excalibur, as well as a tram, and there's a mall between Luxor and Mandalay Bay that you can also walk through. So there's not a lot of street traffic in this area of the Strip, but it's nice if you want to stay indoors. It's a pretty good area for families, and it's a pretty good area for budget travelers in general. So, this was the glamour part of the Strip for a while. Not so much anymore, and there may be some changes coming to these properties as well. So if you want to see them as they are, you might want to check it out on your next trip. Not a bad place to stay, a little bit remote, particularly if you're staying all the way down at Mandalay Bay, but that's one of those places where it's such a nice property that you kind of don't mind being down there by yourself. Well, I hope our little synopsis of the Las Vegas Strip has helped you get an idea where you might want to stay or spend much of your time when you're in Las Vegas. If it's helped you out, hit me up with a comment below. And if you've enjoyed this series and you haven't so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. Helps us out, absolutely free of charge. Let your friends know that we're providing some good Vegas information here. We'll be back next Saturday with part 4 of Vegas 101. Until then, I hope that you have a great, lucky, and healthy week. We'll see you all again real soon. Bye-bye.